I didn't realize I had already met the person I was trying to manifest until I stopped trying. At the time, that thought didn't even make sense to me because back then I was convinced love was something I had to chase, fix, or somehow attract. I remember my life feeling full, but not really full. I had a stable job, a decent apartment, a routine that looked fine from the outside. Mornings were predictable: coffee, emails, quick scroll through social media. Evenings were quieter than I like to admit. I'd usually sit on the couch longer than necessary, watching shows I wasn't fully paying attention to. And somewhere in between all that, there was this constant background thought: why hasn't it happened for me yet? Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet, persistent question. I'd see people getting engaged, moving together, talking about when you know, and I'd nod along, but internally I was trying to figure out what I was missing. That's when I started getting into the idea of manifestation. It felt logical in a strange way. If your thoughts shape your reality, then maybe I just needed to think differently. So I tried. I made a list of qualities my soulmate would have. I visualized conversations, imagined how they'd look at me, how it would feel to be understood without explaining everything. I even remember thinking, okay, this is it. I'm finally doing something about it. And for a while, it felt productive, like I was moving towards something. But nothing really changed. Days turned into weeks, and the only thing that seemed to grow was this subtle pressure I didn't notice at first. Every interaction started to feel like a test. If I met someone new, I'd immediately analyze it. Is this them? Could this be something? If it didn't feel right, I'd feel slightly disappointed, even if I didn't like the person that much. Looking back, I wasn't meeting people, I was evaluating them. The strange part is the shift didn't happen during some big moment. It started with something small. There was this coworker, Ethan. We'd been working in the same office for almost a year. Nothing unusual about him. We talked occasionally, mostly about work, sometimes random things like weekend plans or food places nearby. He was easy to talk to, but I never saw him as anything more than that. Not because of anything specific, I just didn't feel that spark I thought I was supposed to feel. One afternoon, we both stayed late to finish a project. The office was quieter than usual. No background chatter, no distractions. At some point, we just started talking. Not about work, about random things at first: music, old habits, things we used to believe when we were younger. And then somehow the conversation shifted. He said something simple. I don't even remember the exact words, but I remember the feeling. It was the first time in a long time that I wasn't thinking about how I was coming across. I wasn't analyzing. I wasn't wondering where it was going. I was just there. And that felt unfamiliar. After that night, nothing dramatic changed. We didn't suddenly start dating. There was no big realization like, oh, this is my soulmate. In fact, I didn't even think about him that way. But I noticed something subtle. I stopped trying so hard. Not intentionally, it just faded. The lists, the visualizations, the constant mental checking, it all started to feel unnecessary. Instead, I found myself paying more attention to how I actually felt around people. Not how they matched my expectations, but how I felt in their presence. And with Ethan, it was always the same. Calm. Not exciting in a chaotic way. Not intense. Just steady. At first, I almost dismissed it because it didn't match the idea I had in my head of what love should feel like. There was no immediate rush, no overwhelming emotion, just consistency. And for some reason, that made me hesitate. I remember thinking, what if I'm settling? That thought stayed with me longer than I'd like to admit. The turning point came a few weeks later. It wasn't anything dramatic. We were sitting outside during lunch, talking about something completely unrelated. I think it was about a trip he had taken years ago. and I caught myself doing something I hadn't done in a long time. I wasn't trying to impress him. I wasn't filtering my thoughts. I wasn't even thinking about whether he liked me. I was just comfortable. And that's when it hit me. This isn't what I thought it would feel like. But maybe that's the point. I realized that everything I had been trying to manifest was based on an assumption. That love had to feel intense to be real. That there had to be some kind of immediate certainty. That if it didn't feel overwhelming, it probably wasn't right. But sitting there, I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt understood. And for the first time, I started questioning my own definition of what I had been searching for. After that, things didn't suddenly become perfect. There were still moments of doubt. I remember overthinking small things, texts, pauses in conversations, the usual patterns I had built over time. But something had shifted. Instead of trying to control the outcome, I started observing my own reactions. Why did I feel anxious when things were going well? Why did calmness make me uncomfortable? Why did I associate unpredictability with excitement? Those questions stayed with me, and slowly my perspective started to change. I realized that a lot of what I thought was chemistry in the past was actually just uncertainty, and what I'd labeled as boring was often just emotional safety. That was a difficult thing to accept, because it meant I had been misreading my own experiences for a long time. Ethan and I eventually started spending more time together, not in a forced way. It just happened. We'd grab coffee, go for walks after work, talk about things that didn't need to lead anywhere. And the more time we spent together, the more I noticed something I hadn't expected. There was no pressure, no constant need to figure things out, no feeling of trying to get it right. And that changed everything. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to become someone else to be loved. I was just being myself, without even thinking about it. The real shift, though, wasn't about him. It was about me. I stopped seeing love as something I had to attract, and started seeing it as something I had to recognize. That was the part no one really talks about. We spent so much time trying to create the right conditions, say the right things, think the right thoughts, but we rarely question the assumptions behind those efforts. What if the problem isn't that love isn't showing up? What if we don't recognize it when it does, because it doesn't match the version we created in our heads? Looking back, I didn't manifest a person. I shifted my perception, and that changed what I was able to see. Ethan didn't suddenly become my soulmate. He was always someone I could have connected with. I just wasn't looking in the right way. We've been together for a while now, and if I'm being honest, it still doesn't feel like what I used to imagine. There's no constant intensity, no dramatic highs, but there's something else. Something quieter, more stable, more real. And I think that's what I was actually looking for all along, without realizing it. Sometimes I wonder how many people I overlooked before this, how many moments I misread, how many connections I dismissed because they didn't fit the story I had created in my mind. That thought doesn't make me regret the past, but it does make me more aware of how easily we can misunderstand our own experiences. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's this. The biggest shift didn't happen when I tried harder. It happened when I started questioning what I believed love should look like. And sometimes I still think about that version of me, the one sitting on the couch wondering why it hadn't happened yet. I wish I could tell them something simple. Not advice, not instructions, just a question. What if nothing is missing, and you're just looking at it the wrong way?